Welcome to today's show. We're going to continue diving into this, how to break this invisible ceiling. Before we do that, Shane, how are you today, man?
I'm doing well today, Trevor. Looking forward to talking about this. I always like marketing, let me rephrase it. I like portions of marketing, but I like it when somebody starts to get data and some of these smaller tweaks they can do.
Yeah.
So I like the data of marketing, or even the systems of. I like the systems of marketing.
Yeah.
I don't actually like marketing itself.
Got it. Well, I remember marketing for me used to be like this, almost like this mystery. It was like this magic box that was just like some people just got, they opened the right present and they could figure it out or whatever. I didn't understand it. It just seemed kind of mystical to me.
Yeah.
Right. And it was like, and then I understood like on a really high level. Yeah. Well, you got to run some ads and then you just make lots of money. And I'm like, oh yeah, let's be a marketer or let's do some marketing. And then I didn't even actually understand what that meant. When you say I'm going to be a marketer, I'm like, I would confuse a lot of sales with marketing because those are very closely.
100%, yeah.
They're like best friends, but they are not the same thing. And
I like sales, right?
Uh-huh.
I much prefer sales versus marketing. But I like the systems around marketing. And what I found early on, honestly, is I could do okay marketing, have a good to great marketing system, and then have a good be a good salesman. And that was good enough for me. I didn't have to be super creative.
Yeah.
I didn't have to have the best tagline. I didn't have to be the best at any of this stuff, which was great because I'm not naturally a creative person. I'm a systems guy.
Yeah.
I like to do systems. So that was my strength, right? The systems and the sales system. I'm a pretty good salesman, but the system I created was good enough, and it wasn't even overly complicated, right? And we'll talk about sales systems and another thing, but the marketing with even just follow-up alone and digging into some of the metrics was where I excelled.
Yeah.
So that's the part I like. Not your standard marketing stuff, right? Which I always hated and thought I just didn't like it, is what I'm saying.
Well, the thing is, you have to have all of that, right? So you have to have that creative. You have to have the guy on the team, whether it's you and running your firm or someone else on the team that likes that. They have to like, okay, I want to craft the message just this certain way, or we're going to do this video from this angle with this backdrop, and you're going to say these words, and like you have to have someone who likes that part of it because that's that creative fun. It's like the artist, right, who likes to paint. Not everybody has that skill, but those who have that skill, I'm looking in my office, I'm looking at that painting on the wall. I'm like, it's a beautiful painting right there, right? It's a skill. It's required to do it.
And for years, I outsourced all that. Is what I did, right? I look at it and I'm like, nope, go with this, right? All right, my skill is let's find somebody who's got it going. Who do you use? Great, let me use this guy. That was my outsourcing, and it worked. Honestly, it worked well for years and years.
Yeah. Well, and I think and I think once you get into it, and really kind of the nuances of marketing is once you've started marketing, you might have some success, and then there comes a moment where it stops working. Yep. Right. I remember, I can't remember who I was listening to but it stuck with me, and it had to do with like social media, things like that, people posting ads, and they were working, and then all of a sudden they stopped working. And the way he said it, it was hilarious because he's basically like, hey, it's not the algorithm. You just suck. And I was just laughing because I'm like, he's not wrong, right? Yeah. Because at the same time, and I think that's the default, right? We look at when we're marketing, we want to try to, when things stop working or maybe they were working and now they're not working, the same message, same videos, same ads, you didn't change anything, but all of a sudden it quits working, and we want to just blame the algorithm, it's the market, it's other people, it's other situations. We want to blame all of that. And could those be impacted? Yes, that could be part of it. But the reality is usually it's what you're doing.
I was going to say,
you.
If it is all those things, which is valid, right? And to some extent, it doesn't matter. You've got to accept responsibility and say, okay, something changed. I got to fix me, and I got to fix what I'm doing. Because that gives you some power and control, and you can do things versus just being a victim and having no ability to fix anything.
Well, when you first started marketing, Shane, your firm, how important? I mean, and I really don't know the answer to this question, but how important was it for you for like actual metrics, KPIs, things like that, like to understand? Like, did you start out the gate because your mind's kind of analytical that way, anyways?
It wasn't. So my metric was, I bought this Yellow Page ad.
Mm-hmm.
How many clients can I tie to this Yellow Page ad, right? Like,
Right.
overall. So I wasn't even tracking lead, or I probably was aware of leads, but really it was clients, right? I tracked clients. And that was the complicated part. That was it, right? I was smart enough to get a trackable phone number for each Yellow Page ad, and I would track the clients from there. That was it. That was as much of the metrics as I got. And like when I was doing jail mail, doing criminal work, we mailed out 800 postcards a week. And that resulted in about 30-ish calls.
Mm-hmm.
People who called me, and then through the follow-up process, I'd get hired by like 6 or 8. Right? So that was as complicated as my metrics got. Now, if I went back and did it again, I would track more stuff, right?
Yeah.
I would exclude, and even as unsophisticated as it was, I figured out like 6 or 8 weeks in, like, oh, one of the addresses on this place is the homeless shelter, right? This should be screened out. And it took probably 8 weeks, though, for me to see who my ideal client was, because I didn't know. In my mind, my ideal client was anybody who got arrested, right? That was with the felony. That was my ideal client. Well, no, it really wasn't. I thought it was, but it was not. I did a lot of aggravated assaults, they were just right in the target zone for who wanted my services at the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I tracked some metrics, but not a ton.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't track some of the things we're going to talk about, like speed to lead. And I did have follow-up, but I didn't track follow-up in the sense that, do most people convert on call number 3 or call number 7 or letter number 7 or letter number 2? None of that. I just set up the system and let it run, and said the whole system was like 6 months. Right? It was like a whole bunch in the beginning, a whole bunch in the middle, and it just ran. So I didn't track any of that kind of stuff. The most I tracked was when some of my ads failed, and the sophisticated tracking I had was, no clients called me from this trackable phone number, so it sucks.
Right.
But I didn't know why it sucked. I couldn't tell that. It was just, it's bad.
Yeah. Well, dude, I think you started out a lot further than a lot of these people. And what I want you guys to get, and when you hear this, so KPIs matter. They're probably the most significant part of it. Key performance indicators, your metrics. What's actually happening? Because when your marketing's failing, it is not failing randomly. It's not a random failure. It's not like when I'm marketing, to say, I don't know why it's not working, just means you have not analyzed the data in the right KPIs, or you're not looking at the right information. Because you can, whether it's SEO, whether it's Yelp, whether it's meta ads, wherever you're marketing right now. I mean, I don't think the Yellow Pages even exist anymore, so I can't say that one.
Yeah.
Maybe they do. Maybe in a digital form, but I don't think I haven't seen a phone book in years.
It's been a long time. I haven't given them money in a long time.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I don't think they're there anymore. But like no matter what it is, realizing that if you don't look at the numbers, and one caveat I'll tell you right now, you probably could, because you could be like overanalyze with the numbers, but for the tense of this conversation, you can't over measure, meaning there's not a metric that you could say, well, I want to measure this, I want to measure that. It may not be as relevant, but you really can't. You can measure pretty much everything, but you can under measure, and that will create a problem. So don't ever think that I'm measuring too much or I'm looking at too much of the data. I've yet to meet someone that's really been a problem for them. But the other way, for sure, right? Not measuring.
My only caveat on that at all would be when people get analysis paralysis, right? They just want to spend weeks and weeks analyzing data before they make a decision. And that works super well for some people. Doesn't work super well for me. I'm more of all right, I know about what we need. Let's throw a bunch of stuff at the wall, and then let's measure it and see what happens, and then we'll cut some stuff out. But when people under measure, and certainly, like, they don't know where their clients are coming from, right?
Yeah.
And then they want to make changes to their marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be devastating to a firm, and you not even realize it.
Yeah.
Right? Because depending on what your sales cycle is, how quickly the things impact, you can trash a great firm because you quit doing it. I know people who are referral marketers, right? Everything is network marketing. Their MO is they'll go to dinner with a lunch with somebody twice a week, right? And what happens is when they don't tie that to the actual marketing or they don't measure, they get busy and it drops to once a week and then it drops to once a month and then they look up and they got no clients.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is because they quit doing their marketing. They quit
Yep.
going around and they didn't measure it and they just changed some stuff, right? Or
Yep.
I've seen people have fabulous ads that are working. Everything is great and they get bored of the ads or they get bored of their own marketing, so then they want to change it, right? They're like, oh, we need something new and fresh.
Yep. I think you just hit the nail right on the head. You get bored of it way before the market does, and you'll make these adjustments without knowing that. I've watched happen. I have been pulled into that. I've been drawn into it. It's like you work because you've been working on that message or that marketing material for a while, so you've seen it way more than anyone else has ever seen it. And so, just making those adjustments. It's funny on that point because I've watched people do that. But there's so many different things. I think understanding when you look at when you kind of the starting point, right? Looking at when you're starting, we know there's lots of KPIs. And again, marketing is one of those things that we could talk about there's so many elements and we have a lot of episodes here on marketing, but I want to hit on just the flow of things, right? When you look at really what's actually happening in it. And one of it starts with, what is your message that you're actually bringing out? Meaning, are you just speaking generic terms, or is there something unique about what you're saying to the marketplace? This could be in networking meetings. This could be in, just sit down with a Cairo. This could literally be what your website says, right? And there's a couple like cliche, we're going to work hard for you. We care about our clients. We're going to get you top dollar. Like all these things. I'm like, well, everybody says that. And saying we're the best. Okay, well, everybody can say that they're the best and find whatever data they want to even back it up. But when you have a generic message, I think this is key because I've seen a lot of marketing that is very generic, and it's not specific. It doesn't create any polarization. There is no reason for me to move forward. I'm not going to remember it. I don't remember who you are, right? There's some billboards here I'm in Utah, and there's some billboards here, and there was this. I still remember it. I mean, it's Burton and Burton is the name of the firm. Right, so if you guys are listening, good job on your marketing. But they have this billboard, and it's just these two pictures of these rings that are like linked, and like right beside it, it has like the rings like broken, and it's a divorce. There's a divorce attorney. But the way they did it, I don't know what. Seeing this is a great one because messaging is more than just the words you're saying or the copy that you're writing. It's even in the visual, the imagery that you see. But they did it in such a way that it draws your eyes to it, and you're like, oh, okay. I'm in no position to be divorced, and I, knock on wood, that I'm never going to be, and I'm doing all the work to never make that happen. But if I ever were, or if someone said, hey, do you know of any good divorce attorneys? I don't even know these guys, but I know their marketing. I remember their billboard. I'd be like, hey, have you ever checked into Burton and Burton? Like it's literally is, and so that's the messaging comes through. But if it's a generic, how many other billboards that are in that same area did I drive past? I don't remember what they are.
Well, like my jail mail, right? My postcard was pretty basic, but who was I appealing to? People who only had $500. I was $500 down, payment plans. That was my target market, was poor folks, right?
Yeah.
But, people who didn't have any money, and who were charged with serious crimes. But had I known more, I could have targeted instead of sending the same postcard to everybody, I could have strided the list, right? I could have had more on the aggravated assault. I could have separated the DUIs, all these things. But like, I know divorce attorneys who they only take women or they only take men, right? So their target market is not everybody getting a divorce. It's women or men. So, what's the first set of data you would pull, Trevor, if you were going to tell somebody to pull their marketing stuff? What would it be?
The first thing, so there's a couple indicators you're going to want to hit on for sure, right? You've got click-through rate on the ad itself. So you want to be able to determine out of how many people are seeing my message, how many are taking the action that I want them to take, right? If it's an online thing that I want to see, if it's impressions, how many impressions per person that I'm clicking? So you can determine do people care? right? When I put this message out, do people care? This is why certain type of marketing, I want you to see there's a distinction, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but there's a distinction between marketing and branding. They're not the same thing. And there's certain types of things that, like, for example, a billboard, very, very hard to track how many people saw that billboard. What I'm talking, right? The quote unquote click-through rate, very hard to track how many people saw it. And right, the billboard companies are great. They'll tell you, well, this billboard gets seen by 333,000 people a day. And you're like, okay, well, just because those cars drove past doesn't mean, right? This is like, that's like, it's branding, right? You're more so it's hard to check that. So I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. But when you look at this, that to me is priority number one. I want to know when I put in a marketing, whether it's an email, right? So an email, my first thing I'm looking for, open rate. Are people even opening it, right? It's the action. So whatever the action is you want them to take from whatever marketing you're doing, whether it's a Yelp ad, SEO, like I said, it doesn't matter. Whatever that is, that's the first thing you want to indicate and look at. Now, that doesn't necessarily tell you if your messaging is right? Because that could basically, you could be attracting, like what you said, we're talking about, Shane, you could be attracting the wrong person. Yep. But the first thing you want to see is when I put this message out, do people respond? Once they've responded, now is where it gets fun. This is where it gets really exciting, because now you get to actually look at, well, was I targeting the right person, right? Because once you got the message that's getting someone to react to it, now we're like, well, who am I targeting? Because now we get to look at, well, are they taking the action I want them to take once they've made the first action, right? If let's say it's a Facebook ad. I've got a Facebook ad. They click on the Facebook ad. Great. So that's a click-through rate. Okay, I got them to click. Now they've clicked. Now what do? When they've clicked on the ad and they go to wherever it is you sent them, to your landing page, your website, to an application, whatever it is that you have, maybe it's trying to get them directly to, whatever it is, then you're figuring out, do they take that action? And those are probably the two biggest indicators right out of the gate. And like I said, I could list out like 20 KPIs that would get really confusing to some of you guys who've not done a lot of them. But those two, that's definitely at least get you started.
And see, I like step 2, right? So like I came up with my whatever I was going to do, right? I read a book that talked about a drip campaign, sales campaign, all of this kind of stuff. And I was able to calculate my cost per signed case, right? Which is your step 2, sort of the second thing you do. Your cost per signed case for me is my main metric that I track how stuff is successful. And I cost per signed case per lead source, right?
Yep.
And I'll do buckets, and then I'll do individuals sometimes inside that bucket, right? Like my cost per signed case, we do it for all of our marketing for the website, cost per signed case. When I was doing network marketing, what was my cost per signed case in time and money, right? And track whatever it is. And that's why you want to track stuff in your big buckets so you know what's working too.
Yep.
So you don't kill something that's generating all your leads. And if you're tracking what Trevor's talking about, a bucket can be giving you a ton of leads, but if they're all the wrong leads and wrong clients, or you're getting no clients from that bucket, you're wasting your money.
Yep. Yep. In the marketing world, they call it CAC, which is client acquisition cost. I always think it's weird how they say it, CAC. Yeah. But and it's your cost per signed client. If you don't have that data, then everything else I talked about, it's hard. This is what's hard about with the question you asked me, Shane, because there isn't one that's the right one. You need all of those metrics, because for example, let's say that revenue wise, you make $5,000 per client. That's your average revenue, right? For when it's all said and done, you settle the case, it's $5,000. Let's just say that's the number, just to keep it round numbers. At $5,000, then you have to determine what will that cost to sign a client. How much did that cost? If it costs you $5,000 in marketing, ad spend, and all these things to acquire that client, and your profit is $5,000, and it costs you $5,000, well, you could literally continue down that marketing path that you're on and make $0 forever.
You could.
Right? And so, but if you don't know that, you're going to think, oh, I made $5,000 on that was my profit, or we call it profit, but it really wasn't. That was my gross. That was the money that came in off of that client. And transverse of that's the other side. If you've got a client acquisition cost of $500, so for all the marketing you spend, it costs you $500 to get a signed case. When you make $5,000 on that case, well, in that scenario, You should probably spend more money on marketing.
You probably should,
You
right?
should throttle down.
And if you're going to get your average fee, right, which we need to know our average fee for this kind of thing, it's on closed cases at the end of a case, right?
Yep.
Whatever your method is, you can do it. Now, if you get a retainer up front and then they pay hourly out of that and it's supplemented, it might be a little different. I'm continuing to see I can figure out my average settlement or my average attorney fee, by lumping all this together. But then I also have to figure out how many of the cases I sign make it to completion to back out to get that client acquisition cost or the cost of a signed client. And with that, you can start tracking and seeing, does it make sense or not? Because some of our firms, you're a PI firm, you do high volume motor vehicle accidents, your average fee may be $8,000. Okay? If a vendor is pitching you and saying, hey, I'm going to get you signed cases at $2,500 or $3,000 a piece, well, if you're only going to sign half of those and you're at $6,000 now, there's not a lot of spread there. You need to know your average fee so you can figure out, can you make intelligent decisions? And I've seen people cancel things that they're doing exactly what you're doing. They're like, this is giving me so many leads, but none of them are turning into cases, or they're all low value cases. So they're barely breaking even on those things. And then I've seen them kill another source where the upfront cost seemed higher, but that's where they were making all their money. Or vice versa, the cost per client on that was like $500, which is awesome. And they cancel it because they don't like it. Okay, well,
Right. Well, it's all got to be data driven. I think that's the point too that you're making as well, is realizing this has got to be driven off the data, not off emotion or feelings. You have to make your decisions off marketing, off of what's actually happening from the numbers, not your feeling about it.
Right. So we pull our 30 days of marketing data. We calculate our cost per signed case. We identify which one of those lead sources is generating the most revenue. Is that what you would do? Or the lowest cost per signed case to highest revenue ratio, however you want to do that.
Right.
What's next? How do you identify the weakness where you need to spend your time?
Well, that's where you start to dive into things like conversion rate. And this is, it's interesting. We'll use a real life example because I think you came to a realization just over the last little while with your own intake, right? And realizing if numbers dip, it's natural to want to blame one thing. You'll have your own thing that's kind of like your thing. You want to blame it. And so let's say leads dip and you'll want to blame, it must be my vendor. They must be producing me lower quality leads. Right. And so you're like, it's that's the problem. That's the problem. If you don't start to look at, this is why marketing and sales blend themselves together, right? Because you can have leads coming in and you could say, well, these leads aren't very good. They're bad leads. But then you could actually look and realize your sales teams, their numbers have dropped. And you're like, well, why if their numbers dropped? And you're like, well, they're not saying, or maybe they're not following the process that already existed there, et cetera. So like real world, you've been going through this right now after the first of the year. So like, what are some of the things that you've seen just over the last week or so?
Yeah. So the initial thing is everybody's intent is they blame the vendors, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not in your office and they're just being mean and taking your money and doing a worthless job, right? That's what we think, right?
Yeah.
And we looked at that, but then we also looked at and we're like, well, lead flow's down a little bit, but not enough to the problem, right? And we have multiple lead sources, so the odds that all of them being down low is pretty low, right?
Yeah.
It's possible if all you do is advertise on Facebook, they change the algorithm, you're going to lose a couple months, but not across the board.
Right.
So that made me concerned. That seems unlikely when every bucket is low. Okay, it's probably not external then. Now it's probably internal. Then we started looking at, okay, what's our let's pull up our conversion rate. Where is it at? And we realized if your conversion rate drops, it's not just, we didn't realize it. I mean, I knew it, but the conversion rate dropped, which has a proportional impact on your leads. Because if you're converting 20% and that conversion rate drops to 15, it's not like you've lost 5%, you've lost 25% because now your conversion rate is, only 75% is good. So it's a massive impact to your firm or to your client acquisitions. And that's what we identified. Like, okay, we've had some changes. Maybe training's a little down. Maybe enthusiasm. There's now that we know the problem is converting, now I can focus on there and fix that issue.
Yep. And that's the key is you've got to be able to look at that, right? Is it a messaging problem? Am I not getting people to click? are people clicking, but they're not converting, right? I'm not getting them to actually jump on a call. They're not signing a consultation, right? So I need to look at that. What's my conversion rate from when those people that clicked? So it's like if you picture it like this, it's a big funnel. And at the top of the funnel, it's really wide open. It's this big, huge, massive funnel that just funnels down. And as you go down each layer, it funnels lower and lower. Because you want to get to your ideal client, and this is where, hey, the bottom of the funnel, this is where I'm actually closing and selling the deal. Top of the funnel, it's going to be a wide net. Not everybody's going to convert, but you want to continue to every step down. You're continuing to look at those data points, and this is what will allow you to determine where the problem is. If it's not in your messaging because people are clicking, you're like, okay, cool. Now, are people taking this next action? Right? You may have heard people. Some of you guys may have heard people talk about top of the funnel. Right, so that's the top that broadcasted message. So if your top of the funnel is working and you're getting people to convert, but they're stuck at this one place, sometimes it's as simple as realizing, okay, we are actually targeting the right people. We're getting them to give us their name and email, but they're not booking the consultation. So what's happening in that process? What are we doing wrong there? So maybe it's there at that level, or like what you guys identified, right? Okay, the lead flows are still coming in. We still have those, but this percentage is off on our conversion rate. Once they get here, we're not converting.
And this is usually the area for, I would say, law firm owners, especially smaller law firms where the lawyer is doing most of the converting and sales calls themselves, right? The consultations.
Yep.
Usually the lawyer's off. And that's where it's so critical to track that when they come in, right? Are they a qualified lead, meaning do I want this case or this client?
Yep.
And then how many of them am I converting? Because most lawyers will tell you they convert everybody they want, right? Which is an absolute lie. Yep. If they're doing any kind of marketing, they're not. So tracking that, but that's usually where to start. And that's the hardest part for most lawyers if they're smaller and doing it themselves. Or if they've got somebody they know who's been doing the converting themselves for a long time or whatever, well, they're great. Well, maybe not. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they're going through, maybe something's off. So usually we don't want to look there, and usually if you've had marketing that was working and you didn't change anything yourself, it's probably internal.
Yep. And we have to get you to understand, I think a big takeaway from today, and then we'll get into some simple action items you can take, is you can't assume anything, right? In the marketing game, there cannot be assumptions. You cannot assume that this is working or not working if you haven't looked at the numbers themselves, and you can't assume the problem. There can be a problem, and you can see, but again, back to the very beginning, problems that happen in marketing doesn't just fail on accident. It doesn't stop working or start working just because it's magic. There's something very specific there, and you can dive into each layer and look at the layers like this. Every action you want the client to take, that's a new layer.
Right,
So
exactly.
Every time you want them to do something, that's the next layer, and you want to be able to track that rate. How many of those people that were at that layer took the step to the next level? And once you have that, that's what's called control. You have a controlled process. And now you can base everything off of that. Now when you make adjustments to marketing, systems, sales, things like that, or any of those things that are happening on your front end, when you make those adjustments, you measure it to the control, right? So if your normal close rate of, from someone who actually books a consultation, let's say is realistically, 40%. So 40% of those people do it. Then you step back, hire, bring someone in. All of a sudden, you look at the data and you notice that number's now 30%, right? It's not your marketing on the top end didn't work. So steps 1, 2, and 3, those are working just great. There's nothing wrong there. It's that 30%. But let's say, right, now we're looking at numbers, and the conversion is still at 40%, but your revenue's down. And you're like, well, what's going on? So then you start looking at other levels on that step, and you realize less people are clicking. Oh, shoot, less people are clicking, so my click-through rate is actually lower. Why is that dropping? Maybe it's time to refresh my message, right? So now we know the problem's up here. But if you have those set up and you have your controlled baseline, marketing becomes, hopefully you like math, because it literally becomes a mathematical thing. You just look at the numbers, compare the numbers, base it off of that. So I think for what would be effective for you guys to just take some really simple actions, and I'm almost positive because every client that we work with, this is not something that they normally do, so you probably haven't done it either. But I want you to go through the last 30 days of your marketing. I want you to just pull up all your marketing data, all sources, wherever it is that you've got marketing data, all of the numbers, right? And I want you to calculate the simplest thing ever, which is what is your cost per signed case? right? How much did it cost you to actually acquire that case, and then identify what is the highest return on your investment right now, right? Which source is it? I had the client literally last week. We were talking last week. I asked him like, "Hey, what were your numbers for January?" And he's got I think he has 4 sources that he's doing. He's doing like Yelp and SEO and some other things. He's got 4 different areas that come in, and he's like, his words, marketing's working great. I'm like, oh yeah, which one's working the best? And he just like stared at me. He's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, how do you know that it's working? And he's like, well, because I made a lot of money this month. And I was like, well, okay. Well, how do we know? What do you mean you made a lot of money? And he's like, well, I was signing these cases and I'm busy. And I'm like, okay, great. So he went through, and this is funny, this isn't his first time. He'd gone through every single thing that we were just talking about today, all of today's show, and he basically didn't have any of that data. So then I started asking him some of the data. I'm okay, well, even just down to what is your cost per signed case on your Yelp ads? How many of them how many of you actually converted? And he's like, well, I don't know. A few of those ones, I think. But then he was like, well, they might have come from SEO. Right? And it was hilarious. I'm like, dude, what are we doing here? So what I'm asking you to do, your action item today, is something that you have to do, because same with this client. If he knows which one, just like if you know which one is giving you your highest return on investment, well, guess what? That's the one you can start to tweak, work on, or double down on if your client acquisition is low enough for your cost per case and then
more
revenue.
Money, right?
Yep, just turn the nozzle on, like when you picture a hose. You're just turning it on, giving you more money out of it, and start to look at, right, which ones do you either need to fix or which ones do you need to increase, right? Which ones do you actually need to double down on? And this is a hard one. Last thing as we wrap today, Shane, on when somebody's just starting out doing this, let's say they don't have a system and a process in place, and pulling all this data, doing all that, because I mean that's assuming that they've got all this going and they're doing all this stuff and etc. What would be your advice to not let them get overwhelmed when they're doing all this?
If I were just starting out and didn't know much of anything, I would figure out my average case size, right? Average closed case. I settled 30 cases. What's the average revenue? Let's say I settled 10 cases. How much revenue did I get that month? Okay, my average revenue per case. Then I would take everything I spent money on, and I would just divide that up by those cases I closed. And that would give me a basic cost per client that I was doing. And then it would at least tell me, okay, this is what I should be shooting for, right? Assuming it's working. Yep. And you're actually making money. And then I could start trying to dial in and figure out which buckets were doing that. So I would then start identifying where that case came from.
Yep.
And then you've got your buckets.
No, it's perfect. That's a great way to start. Just start with the simplicity of it, because you can get caught up in the numbers here and get confused. It's not that the numbers are bad, it's that you'll get confused. So really just remember, it's you're trying to make money. So figure out how much does it cost you to bring that client in, and are you making more money than it costs for that client? At that point, great. If the answer is yes, cool. You know that whatever it is you're doing, even if it's broken in 73 places along the way, it's in the right direction. And right. Now is when you can start to dive in and then use the measuring stick of every decision, every action item you want them to take, from they're a cold lead, don't know who you are, to signed case client, you're making money. Every action item they take, that is another place of conversion for you to check and analyze and measure that data.
And I'll say this too, right? And some marketers don't like this. I know what my cost per client acquisition should be, my cost per signed case, right? And if I get it in the zone, right, a lot of times I won't even do it. I won't start tinkering with anything, trying to beat my control, right?
Yeah.
Which some marketers would tell me I should try to drive that cost down as low as I could, which is perfectly valid. Once I get it in my sweet spot, I'm like, hey, this is good enough for me. I'd rather spend more money and find other ways and just keep dumping into my stuff if it hits my cost per signed case that I'm comfortable with.
Yeah. Well, once
it gets out of whack, then I'm digging way in, right? I'm figuring out what's going on.
Well, most of what you're talking about is going to be a full-time person in that role, right? So, unless your firm's out of size where it makes sense for you to have a marketing executive that's going to do that constantly, then yeah, don't worry about it. Because as long as
And
the
I will
numbers
say
are
my
where they need to
marketing
be.
person, that he digs into the numbers much more than I do, right? And he's like tracking all the stuff, and I'm like, it's cool, but
Yeah. Well, at the end of the
uh,
day, it's you're interested in the profit of it, but either you like as you grow. But this is people will screw themselves up by trying to do what you're talking about. Like this is why you don't do it. Like they'll just get too stuck in to those
in the
things and
weeds.
not
Yeah,
actually drive the revenue. So what is that statement? Keep it simple, stupid.
yeah,
Right?
I'm a big believer in that one.
Oh yeah, it's there's lots of things you could do, but if you keep it simple and you just keep driving the revenue that way. So, well, that brings us to a wrap of today's show on marketing, etc. Make sure you do those action items. I promise you'll get value from them if you will. If you are not tracking your marketing right now, you're just sending money out and hoping that you get some return. I can promise you are literally leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table that can be capitalized, and there's people that want to hear from you. There's people that want you. So if your messaging's landing and you're pulling them in, look at the data, make sure that you have it all there. Go ahead and share this show up with somebody else who might get value from today's show. And if you got value, give us a like and a subscribe. It's the only way this show is going to grow, so that we can help other people in legal space to kind of figure this out, right? And jumping, we are all in this together. There's no reason not to be and not to help each other out. So do us a favor and share it up. Also, we do offer for right now, I don't know how long we'll do it, but we do offer up kind of a deep dive into you and your firm, where we're more than happy to kind of peel back the layers and help you with this side of it and look at your structure, your operations, and see really where are you actually stuck. And maybe it's just in your front end marketing. I have no problem looking at your funnel and saying, okay, you're broken here. So to get access to that, to see if you'd qualify to be able to jump on a call with us, head over to legaledgecoaching.com and you can book a consultation there, get you a couple questions to fill out a little application to make sure that it makes sense and that you're in the right position. We're in the right position, and then you and I can chat. But other than that, we appreciate you guys being listeners of the show. Go out there, do your thing, crush it, make $1 bajillion. That's what we're out here to do, right? All right, we're out of here, guys. Have a fantastic day.
Later, guys.